Okay, hey again, everyone. Once again, it's Emma here at Function Point. Thanks so much for joining in today. We're going to get started. Today's session is all about creating estimates, and so the name of it is aptly Stay on Top with Estimates. And Mark is going to be presenting for us again today. Mark, can you hear me okay? Have I got you there?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound really good. And I am recording, so for anyone today who has to jump off before we wrap up or has a colleague that they think would have liked to attend, we are recording the session. We'll get that up available for you as soon as we can. I'm just going to run through like an agenda slide, and then I'll probably hand it over to you, Mark. So let me just do that here quickly. Yeah, so here we go. So our agenda today, we're going to be going a bit over some best practices for creating super fabulous estimates, review how to create a job from your estimate, and then a little bit at how to associate briefs and schedules to those jobs once you've got them there. Mark, anything I missed there that you think you might be covering today?
Nothing really that we need to mention. There's going to be a lot of kind of little bells and whistles here and there I'm going to be touching on, but that
Ooh,
looks good.
I like bells and whistles. Okay, well, let me make you the presenter, and then you can take it away. So just hang tight while I try to overcome my technology challenges here. Make presenter. Okay, so we are ready when you are, Mark.
Okay, there we go. And you're able to see my function point demo version up there?
I do, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Perfect. Well, thanks for joining in today, everybody. We appreciate all you taking the time to join into our webinars. Just a bit on today's topic. I already mentioned it, but it's looking at a workflow process, so starting with estimates. And that's what this series has really been about, looking at different workflow processes. And last week, we looked at a process of starting with a schedule and how you are able to more accurately estimate things based on the data you're putting into schedules and going from there. Today, we're going to be talking about a more kind of standard, typical process where we're starting with an estimate and then having that drive the workflow from that starting point, from the estimate starting point. And then if you look at some of the next webinars in this series, the one we're looking at next is going to be looking at taking in client requests. And I just want to mention it's not just for portal users. The concept of this is really starting with a brief. And actually, I might get this renamed today or tomorrow, but the concept is really starting with a brief, and that may be a client request, or it could just be information that you're gathering internally, and they may not have actually filled it out in the form of a request through the client portal. It could just be a brief that you're filling in based on a telephone conversation with them. And then we're going to be looking at retainers, and then the schedules one is one that we've already done there. But the retainers one is going to be a doozy. I've had a lot of retainer issues coming up with clients. They want better ways of managing them, and I'm looking forward to diving into that one. That one will be a bit longer. So please join us for the continuing this series with other workflow processes that we'll be covering in this webinar series. For today's session, I predict about 45 minutes, so that should be a good estimate as far as how long we'll be able to take here. I oftentimes go over, but I'm going to try not to do so. I've been getting better recently, so about not going over time. A few other things I want to mention. The Function Point blog, we put a lot of effort into this, guys, so please do check out our content. Speaking about retainers, I just wrote up a good blog about some common mistakes I'm seeing with retainers. It's actually going to be a little bit relevant to today because some of the things I'm seeing with retainers is a lack of consistency in how they're structured, specifically the estimates/proposals of those retainers, and how those types of mistakes can lead to big consequences later on. So that'll be coming out sometime in the next couple of days or so. And then specifically, I wanted to touch on the Coach's Corner blog. This is something where we are sharing our own business coach with our clients, and we're allowing you guys to ask questions and then having Roberto, our business coach, and answer those questions and provide you with some great content. So if you do have any suggestions or anything for the Coach's Corner blog requests, please send an email to coach@functionpoint.com. Again, that's just the word coach@functionpoint.com. On the topic of the webinars, if you have any suggestions for webinars, please feel free to email those suggestions as well. You can email that to success@functionpoint.com, and success@functionpoint.com will come to both Emma and myself. So we'll be able to take in those requests, and we're always trying to plan out these webinar series in advance. So we'll take those to heart and see what we can do with them. As always, Emma's going to be answering questions as they come in via the GoToWebinar question box. So in that GoToWebinar panel, that little bar there, there's an option to ask questions. So please feel free to do so, and we will answer those as we can. Now, any questions that we're able to answer during the webinar, of course, we will. Some of those Emma may answer in the box itself, as I mentioned. Others, she may let me know, and I'll show them on screen. Anything that we're not able to answer today, we will follow up with answers later on, provide you with the information that you're looking for. So do please feel free to ask as many questions as you'd like today, and I'll be able to, or I'll try to answer as many as I can. Before we jump in, Emma, anything that I'm missing that I should be talking about before we go ahead?
No, I think you got everything there, Mark, and looking forward to you taking us through that. And yeah, like you said, I'll be here answering questions and looking forward to see what you have to show us.
Awesome, perfect. Getting a bit of an echo as well, so Emma, if you maybe want to just mute yourself while you're not talking there. In our new office, our new big open space, we're getting a bit of an echo there, so just maybe you want to mute yourself there so we're not getting too much of an echo, and then I'll check in with you from time to time, and we'll go from there. Okay, awesome. So let's jump ahead. So I mean, the process that we're going to be looking at today is creating an estimate. I'm going to touch on a bunch of things that I'm seeing agencies not doing or doing that maybe aren't necessarily mistakes, but things that you might want to change. Just small little things that if you take the time to do them every single time you're creating an estimate, it's going to bring you big benefits later on. I'm going to touch about different ways that you can set up estimates to either hide or show information. Touch a bit on printouts. I'm not going to go deep into the admin section for customizing those printouts, but I'm going to show some examples that I have, and then how those different levels of detail in those templates can be utilized. And then, of course, I'm going to show how brief types and schedules can be related to those estimates, and other things like files and how that all gets brought into the jobs. So, I'm also going to talk on about templates as well. But the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and just choose to, as I'm sure many of you would assume, add an estimate. And if we see our client that we're wanting to work with there, great, select them. If we don't, just select Add Estimate. That's going to bring us to our Estimate Add page. Now, this might seem a bit tedious, but I want to go through each of these fields because there are some specific things that I want to mention about them that are important. First of all, the name. It might seem simple, but I'm seeing some common mistakes here, and one is just not providing enough detail in the name. In this example, I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm going to say that we're doing a new brochure for our client, North Shore Auto Group. And we're doing a new brochure for their 2015 car lineup. Now, something I'm seeing a lot is a lot of agencies doing something like this, typing in brochure, and then they're filling in the company name and other information here, so maybe they don't need any other details other than brochure and the name. That's a mistake. You want to provide more detail here, because if you're looking at some reports where perhaps only the job name is present, or if you're doing a custom report from a job list and you need screen real estate for other data, you don't want to have to take up space by filling in company names and types and things like that. So provide more information in the name and try to standardize it. In this case, I might have the North Shore Auto Group 2015 car lineup brochure. That way, I know exactly what this is by looking at the name of it, and I don't have to do any guesswork, and I don't have to include additional fields later on to figure that out. I'm then going to select my type, and this list is coming from the list maintenance area in the admin section. Try to standardize this. Don't let this get out of hand. Don't allow it to be too big. Mine's pretty big because I try to have a list that can accommodate any scenario that I can think of. Have as much details there as you need, but don't let it get out of hand. And if you see something there that you haven't used in a long time, then just get rid of it. I'm going to select the type of brochure, select my company. Now, if I know the name of my client, then I can type in part of that name, and if it's the only result, it'll just fill in. If I type in just maybe the letter N and leave the field, I'm going to get a big list here. Might not want to have to go scrolling through that list, but if I type in the word North, it's the only client that results from it, so it's going to fill in. Choose an estimate contact. I highly recommend having a contact. If you don't have a specific contact for the client, go ahead and add one. You may not have a lot of information for them, but it doesn't take long. North Shore Auto Group is my client. I don't even need to leave the page. I can simply hover over companies and hover over view and right-click on them. If I wasn't seeing them, I could right-click on find and do a search. But I'm going to open this up in a new tab. And I might come in here and just choose to add a contact to the company, so that way I can at least have somebody in there. Let's say it's Jane Smith. We already had our client Paul Holder there, But if I submit this contact, on the other page that I didn't even need to leave, I'm now going to find that individual. So it doesn't take long. It's not very labor intensive to do so. Get a contact in there. It's going to come in handy later on. The account executive will fill in for you automatically if you have a default. If you know that there's a default account executive for this company, then you're going to want to have them, again, on their company details page. And that goes the same for the rate category. If this field did not fill in for you automatically, it's because there is no default rate category for that company on their details page. So just take the couple of seconds it takes to open it up in a new tab, select to edit details, and drop in a default rate category for that company. Over time, all of the clients that you have are going to end up having a default rate category. And that way your account executives and other staff aren't going to have to select that field each time, and there's less guesswork about what rate belongs to this company specifically, especially if they have a rate that is specific to them. Maybe there's a North Shore Auto Group rate category. Client PO number, if they provided you with a PO number that you need to use, fill it in there. That can show up on the PDF. Close probability, something I see ignored all the time. I get it. It may not be something that offhand, or maybe it's 100%, or maybe you really have no idea what percentage you should be putting here. But just throw something in there. If you get into a habit of it, it's going to help in reporting later on. That value can be used in different ways, and it just becomes a habit. Maybe I'm very confident about this, so I'm going to put a 90% chance to close. We then have an overall description of the work, and that's something I see filled out in pretty much all cases. You can't expand those text areas. Delivery date. The delivery date is the due date of the work should the estimate be approved. It's not necessarily the date for when you expect the estimate to be approved. And I have seen it used that way. And if you're diligent about it, you can use it that way. So if I said, okay, well, I need this item approved by the 30th, and then when they approve it, I'm going to update the delivery date. But to be honest with you, I advise against it. Just put in the due date for when the potential work needs to be coming in to the client. So let's say that if this should be approved, then that brochure needs to be done by the 10th of October. Category. Now, category and work type are used in different ways. Sometimes work type is used to determine how you bill. Sometimes it's category. But almost all clients I see are going to have this kind of default structure: retainer, time materials, and fixed price. I believe it comes with a system like that. So we'll say in this case it's a fixed price. Work type, we'll say branding and design. It's not taking me a lot of time to fill in these fields. The more information I have here, the better. Month close. Now, this is basically when do we expect this opportunity to close. And I'm going to say I expect it to close in the month of September. Now, I've had a few clients say to me, well, it doesn't say the year. So I'm looking at reports, and I'm seeing things that were supposed to close in September of 2013. And that really shouldn't be a problem for you. And the reason it shouldn't be a problem for you is because you should be declining those estimates. And when you're running reports, you should be using the statuses. And on the next page, I'm going to touch on the importance of status and getting into a habit of using them and why you should be doing that. And if you are, then the year of the month to close is really not that relevant. And unless you're sending out estimates to clients that you don't think is going to close for 8 months, 10 months, 14 months. But I haven't really come across situations like that. It's usually you send something out to a client, and they're going to approve or decline it. Not within a year at least, anyways. And to be honest with you, if you have something out there that the client may come back to you in a huge amount of time later, decline the old one, copy it, create a new one. But just fill it in because it comes in handy. It's useful for reporting. We're then going to be choosing our service groups. Now, something I'm seeing a lot here with a lot of agencies is an ever-expanding list of services and service groups to accommodate different scenarios. And you really want to keep this in check. You don't want to let this get out of hand. Furthermore, I should not have a single service group that is empty. I should have at least one service for every single service group. I'm seeing cases where agencies are going in and they're creating a service group and they're not putting anything in it, and then they're just kind of adding them in ad hoc afterwards. And if that's what you're doing, I mean, that's fine, but at least have something in there, just at least a line item. If you have, a category for web design and you want to kind of add everything, manually ad hoc after you select it, fine, but at least just put in one line item called web design, just something to be there. Now in this example, I'm going to say that we need our creative services category, and I need everything here, including my non-billable issues category. And that's something that I do advise having on pretty much every job, is a line item for any kind of non-billable time to be going against. And perhaps I also need an expense here, so I'm going to be purchasing some photography as an expense that's related to this estimate. Before I click submit, I just want to check in. Emma, any questions, anything so far?
Oh, hey, Mark. Yeah. If you could maybe address Lori's good question, and I've heard this one from other clients as well, just asking as to why you would have a delivery date in October when the month closes in September. Now, I have my own answer to that, but I'm curious as to what yours is.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good question, and that's a really common question. So what this delivery date is referring to is when is the due date of the actual work. So when do I, in this case, we're doing the 2015 car lineup brochure. So October the 10th is when I need to have a finished printed brochure, maybe 5,000 copies, sent to my client and at their location. On the 10th is when this whole thing needs to be done by. The month close is when I expect them to sign the estimate. It's when I expect them to agree that, yes, this is good, we've signed the estimate, we've signed off on it, you can now start work, and you can bill us. Maybe you bill 50% up front, maybe you bill 100% upon completion, maybe you're billing time and materials monthly, whatever it may be. But the month to close represents when you expect them to sign the estimate as an approved piece of work. The delivery date is when you plan on putting, in this case, a bunch of brochures in your client's lap. Any other questions that I can answer before we hit submit there, Emma?
I think we're okay for now, Mark, but thank you for checking in.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm going to click submit here, and that's going to bring us to the details page of the estimate. So here we have the estimate details page, and it's showing us our client and the name of the estimate there, and other details you'd expect, like the delivery dates and the type and the contact. And here's where we're going to go ahead and fill in our values. Now we have the service group in the descriptions, and we have the services and their descriptions. Any description that fills in automatically is coming from the admin section. If I were to go into admin and look at my services and expenses, whether it be service groups or internal services, I'm not going to go into this, but if I were to select there and go to those items and find this item in the admin section, it's going to have a description field. And if I enter a description there, it's going to fill in here for me automatically. Same with the category. So if you want a default description to fill in, that's done in the admin section where you're creating and editing these line items. Now, one thing I want to touch on is the renaming of the services and the categories. And this is something that we've actually had a little bit of internal debate on here between myself and our support team. Because what we have sometimes is we have clients who have a streamlined service structure, which is fine. I actually recommend it. You have a service group / category and service structure that is not very robust. You try to make everything and be categorized into a few line items. But then what we've had a lot of agencies doing is renaming these, which is not necessarily incorrect. You can rename any of these line items at any time as far as internal services are concerned. But what we've had happening is if I rename research to concept, I have not renamed this item in the back end. As far as the system is concerned, this is an item called research. If I were to run a report for all the time spent for research in a month, the time put into this line item is going to come in. So I'm not renaming the back end, I'm just renaming the label of it in this one case. So we have some clients saying, well, why am I not seeing my time related to this service? It's because you've gone in and you've renamed them. Therefore, the system doesn't care. All it cares about is what the admin section considers this line item to be called. As long as you keep that in mind, there's actually a lot of benefit to being able to rename these things. If you want to call it something different, then you can. If I want to call creative services in this one case, professional services, just as kind of a generic example, then I can do so. So I can rename these items on the fly, and that can be very handy. Just keep in mind, it's not renaming it in the admin section. It's just renaming it in this one instance. Description space is unlimited, and we can expand that to be as much detail as we want. It's just simple text at this point. There is no formatted text within these items. It's just simple text. If I want to put in bullet points for something, I can add, line items here, but it's not rich formatted text. We do have the intention of adding that in the future, so that is something that we will be looking at, but at this point it is just simple text. We can then enter our values. Now, I'm seeing a lot of this. Let's say, we talk to our client, we tell them, okay, we're going to charge you $10,000, for this brochure, maybe including expenses. So in fact, I'll touch on that in a second. I was going to add in a line item for printing, but I'm going to save that for later to show how to add additional things. But let's say it's $10,000 plus printing. Now, I'm seeing a lot of this. I'm seeing a lot of agents, people coming in here and just typing in $10,000 into the first line item. And I get it. You got to be agile. You got to be working quickly. You don't have time to be filling these things out and providing a bunch of detail, especially if your intention is just for the client-facing version to show just the category level. I understand your desire to just enter the dollar value here and move on. And if you really, really need to do that, then go ahead, go for it. But I really advise you to put in the detail. Break that out into the line items that you have. I'm also seeing a lot of this. I'm seeing a lot of putting in dollar amounts here and leaving the hours blank. Now, if your agency doesn't track time, then don't worry about it. If time is completely irrelevant for you, you don't track any time at all, then no problem. Just enter the dollar amounts. But if your intention is to track time to the job that will result from this estimate, then estimate by the hours. Now, I get a lot of response, well, not a lot, but some responses I get from that are, well, we're not charging the client hourly. We're just charging them $10,000. It's a flat fee. It's a fixed price, project base, whatever you want to call it. It's not time materials. It's just a set dollar amount. So why would I need to put in the hours there? The reason is that it allows you to look at better reporting later on. If you're tracking time against a job that you're charging a fixed fee for, the entire purpose of tracking time is so that you know how close you're getting to the dollar value that you're charging your client. So you might as well go further and budget the amount of hours as well. It's also going to help you with scheduling too. So do the due diligence, put in the values, break it out here, and play with it. If I need to get to $10,000 including my photography, maybe I'll come in here and just kind of, even if I'm just guesstimating this, and I don't really know exactly how long this is going to take, but there I've come out to $8,500, and maybe I know that my photography is going to charge me $2,000. I know that's high, but let's say it's actually $1,500. Let's say it's $1,500 bucks. So you'll notice that I have an external expense of photography, and it's $1,500. Now I need to mark that up. I need to make money on this. Maybe it's the coordination for me working with the photographer. I need to be marking up my expenses. I can't just be having this be a pass-through cost. I need to make something off of it. And I want to make 25% on that. Now, I'm then coming over here by $375. So I need to come down somewhere else. Now, instead of changing the rates, or perhaps even instead of changing the hours, what I could do is look at this and say, well, where am I willing to bring the cost down? And right away I might say, okay, well, client management. I'm going to try to spend less time dealing with the client, and I'm going to drop this down to $625. And that brings me to a nice even $10,000. So that's how I've used this override field effectively to bring the cost down without having to mess with my rates, and while still maintaining the amount of hours that I do expect to spend on this. But my goal is to bring it down a little bit. Now, if you wanted to do it differently and say, well, actually, I'm just going to put 6.5 or 6.25 against this, then I could have done that as well. But that's a better way of using that override field. And it works the other way around. If I look and say, okay, well, actually, the budget is $11,000, then maybe I'll just come in here and override it and drop it in there. I expect that this actually is going to only take 10 hours, but I have an extra $1,000 I can make. So let's play with this and put in an override so that I can add a little bit of extra dollar values in there. I'm going to bring it back down to $625. for my nice even $10,000. The rates. Please don't play with the rates too much. There is an option in the admin section that is going to be default to being turned off for everybody, where the system is going to look at the estimate to determine the dollar value it places on every hour of time entered against the job. That is turned off. The default way that the system works is it looks to the admin section to find the rate. If I have somebody tracking time to this copywriting item, if you have staff rates, it's going to look at the staff rates and look and see what does staff person A have as a rate for the service of copywriting. So if I know that everybody has a rate of $100, if I change this to $85 and I put 10 hours here, it's not going to be $850. It's going to be $1,000 because in the admin section the rate is $100. I highly advise you to be adjusting hours and to be adjusting override amounts to come up with the dollar amounts that you need. Do not be adjusting rates. Now, if you work with your clients a little bit differently and you charge them maybe time and materials, and this is really the only case I think this should be applicable, you're charging them time and materials and you're having a phone conversation with them and you say, you know what, instead of a rate of 125, I'm going to drop it down to 105 for this one job. It'd probably be better, instead of creating a whole new rate category, to adjust the rates here. If you work that way, you may want to have the system looking at the estimate for your rates. If you have any kind of confusion about rates, please contact us, let us know. There's good documentation in the support site. And of course, we're always willing and able to assist you with that. But a way to not have to worry about this is to not be playing with the rates. I've worked with a lot of agencies that have a lot of different styles of rates, especially when they're given their AEs the ability and the authority to be offering different rates to different clients all the time, and it just gets messy. You should be looking at what the costs of your staff are, what the cost of your overhead is, using an appropriate calculation to find out what your rate should be in order to make the profit that you need, and then be sticking with those hourly rates. And then when you need to play with dollar values to gain deals, do so by adjusting hours and do so by adjusting overrides, and leave the rates alone. It just makes things so much cleaner and easier. I'm going to jump into some of the staff and the role rates now, but before I do, I just want to check in. Emma, any questions on any of the stuff we've been talking about the last few minutes?
Yeah, a little bit, Mark. If you wouldn't mind, Vera had a good question, and I don't have a great answer for her, and you may not either, and we can always take this one offline. Vera was saying that at her company, they struggle a little bit with the service descriptions, and clients get kind of hung up on them. And if we have sort of advice as what maybe good generic descriptions could be, or if we recommend using them at all, she's saying the clients are often not understanding the descriptions, or it's not exactly what they're going to be doing for them. I see clients either kind of really fill those in great detail or not use them at all. What's been your experience with that, if any?
Yeah, the first thing that I would say is if your clients are struggling understanding the descriptions for the services, don't show the descriptions. Now, if your default printout type has service descriptions on it, then go in the admin section, create a new one, take out the service descriptions, and then just start sending that out. And then if clients come back to you and say, hey, where's the description of what you're going to be doing here, then, have a conversation with them and say, these descriptions are really meant for our internal purposes. So our staff people understand what they should be doing. They're not really client-facing. I'd be more than happy to show them to you, but you need to understand that it's not marketing copy. This is not, we're not writing copy for these service descriptions to try to pitch you and sell you on what we're going to be doing. We're writing this so that our staff have a detailed overview of what needs to be done, not necessarily for your benefit. And see what they say. That advice that I just gave may not be applicable for everybody. You might have clients that want to know the description of each line item, and their response to that might be, well, write it so I understand it. And if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. But my first response to that is, if your clients don't understand the service descriptions, then just don't show them to them.
That's great, Mark. Vera's responding that that sounds really good, so thank you for that. But yeah, nothing else at the moment. I'm hoping, just as a side note, that before we go today, we can. We've had a couple of people ask about just showing the copy estimate feature. I don't know if you had that on your agenda, so maybe if we could tack that on if possible.
Yeah, definitely. That's going to be an important aspect. I'm going to touch on how that relates to templates and just copying real work in general. Looking at the time, we're at 12:30. Based on what I have left to show, I think we're going to go a bit over. Definitely not going to be over an hour, that's for sure. But we're probably going to go over the 45 minutes. I'm looking at probably about 50, 55 minutes here, so another 25 minutes or so. So we're going to be a bit over the 45-minute goal, but I'll keep it under an hour for sure. Okay, so a few other things on rates quickly here. If you have staff rates and or role rates, then they can be utilized. So the design work, I have 20 hours. If I know that I'm going to have 2 senior staff people working on this and I want to incorporate their rates, then I can. And I can do so by clicking on the plus icon to add subcomponents, which in this case would be staff and or roles. And I'm going to choose a couple of our designers, let's say Sarah. I'm going to choose another designer. I'm going to choose Chris here. In fact, I think Eric might have a different rate. Here's a good example. So I have Sarah and I have Eric. And you'll notice that Sarah is at 150, Eric's at 100. Perhaps Eric's a junior designer and Sarah's senior. And they have specific rates. Now those rates are coming from the admin section under rate and staff management and the staff rates area. So that's where they're coming from. You can also get there by looking at service rates and markups and then clicking on staff rates from there. I'm trying not to dive too deep into the admin section today. We have a lot of really good documentation. A lot of previous webinars have touched on this type of thing. Emma writes most of the documents that we provide, and they're really detailed. They have great screenshots. They go over rates in detail. So please, even follow up with us after the webinar. Send us an email if you need more information on rates and where they come from, and we'll help you out. But if you have different rates for different staff, they'll come in here. Now, this is the rate specific to this staff person, Sarah. This is the rate specific to Eric. If I drop in 10 hours each here, it's going to calculate the different rates and gives us our different totals. We also have the ability of selecting a role. If I select the role of designer, this fills in with that individual's rates. That role's rates. Now, it's really important to mention, role rates are exclusively for estimating. They do not have anything to do with actuals. The system is going to look directly at the staff person in the admin section and see what is their rate for the service that they put an hour against. And if the system finds a rate, it will use it. If it does not find a rate, it will use the default rate for that service. The role rate is oftentimes a blended rate. So here's a good example. I have Sarah at 150. I selected Chris, he was 152. But then I have Eric at 100. So a blended rate for the role might be 140. And this allows, if I don't know who's going to be doing the work, but I know it's going to be a combination of junior and senior, I can select the role level. That role will fill in with the role rate, and then as they track time, their specific rates will be used. This is a bit more of an advanced feature. If you're confused about rates, I'd recommend just, not going to this level of detail, but it is available there if you need it. And you can select the specific staff people as well. Now, this will also translate into a schedule, which I'm going to show in a bit. The start and the end dates can be entered here, and that will be brought into the schedule as well. So if for whatever reason you want to enter dates at this stage at the estimate, that will be brought into your schedule if you should choose to do so. So here's another situation. Look, we're now, again, $900 over our work. So how are we going to bring that down? Well, maybe I can cut down some of the research time, bring that down to 5 hours. We're now $400 over. Maybe I can bring the rough drafts down to 11 hours. We're now back down to our 10,000. Didn't have to adjust any rates. I'm just adjusting the hours and override. Save that. So let's now take a look at the printout, the client-facing version of this. And up at the top when I select print, you're going to notice that I have a whole bunch of different options I've created here in the admin section under system setup and printing preferences. I've gone in and I've created these templates. And let's just open up all three, or all four actually. So you'll notice I'm just selecting each one, and I'm jumping back before they load because I just want to get them all open. So here are a bunch of different printout templates I've created. And in fact, I probably should have put a description at the category level so that we can see how that shows, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to go back and reprint each of these, but if there was a description here, it would of course show between this line and this line. But here's an example where we're seeing the hours and the rates and the total. Here's another example where we're seeing, this is what I call my standard, we're seeing the category, perhaps we might have a couple paragraphs of description at the category level, and then we're seeing the services. But I'm not showing their descriptions and I'm not showing their totals. We then have our, I call this a summary. In this example, we're just showing the category level, of course, its description and its total, but we're not showing the services, their descriptions, or their costs at all. This is just very high level. I find this is the most desirable type of estimate to send to a client when possible. The category, as much description of the category as you want to provide, and no other details. This is what I recommend sending whenever possible. And we then have the an example where we're showing a bit more detail. We're showing each of the individual services, their descriptions, their totals, and in this case, even the staff people and their values as well. But we're not showing any of the hours. And these are just, 4 of many different varieties and variations that you can create. And I'm able to select these on a case-by-case basis. We want to standardize these as much as possible because we want the estimate structures that goes to one client to be as closely resembling estimates that goes to other clients as possible. You want to know that you're sending a similar amount of detail as often as possible. Now, here's a really, really common question I get all the time that I want to touch on. Photography. One thing that we haven't done here is we haven't added in the printing expense. Now, my client knows that I'm not doing the printing. We're not a printing house. In my example agency that I'm pretending to be today, we are not a printer. We're, design agency, we're an ad agency, but we don't do the printing. So we're going to outsource the printing. But the photography, I don't want the client to know that we're outsourcing the photography and marking it up. I want it to appear just as if it was a standard part of our service offering. And the printout style that I want to show to them, let's say, is this one. So I want to have, this style where we have the category, the line items, the category description if I had have entered one, but no line item description and no line item value. But I don't want this expense separated like this. So this is how we're going to accomplish this. Close down all these printouts. First things first, I'm going to add in the printing expense. So for expenses, I'm going to add in my external expense of printing, select it, and submit that. And we have our printing expense there. Now, if I want to call this category printing, then I can. I'm going to leave it as expenses for now. Photography, I don't want it in this category. I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to delete it. And then in my professional services category, originally titled creative services, I'm going to choose to add in that expense into that category. So let's add in photography there. Notice it's an external expense of photography. Now we had, $1,500 there, and we're marking it up by 25%. So there's our $1,875 for our photography. The printing, let's say the printing is going to cost us $2,000, and maybe we're only going to mark that up by 10%. So we have our $2,200 worth of printing there. Save that, and now let's take a look at our standard estimate. Notice that photography is not labeled as an expense. But I do have this line item called non-billable issues, totally irrelevant to the client. I do not need to show it there. In fact, I don't even want them to know that there might be issues that we need to be working on that we wouldn't bill them for. It might make us look inefficient or like we make mistakes. And we never want a client to know that we ever make mistakes, even though we are human after all. So how can I get rid of this thing? The way I get rid of it is by going back into my estimate and selecting to view services. View services is basically the uneditable version of what we're looking at. We then see a column for print, and I can choose to deselect my non-billable issues. It's saved, and I can then produce my standard estimate. Notice that it's no longer showing. It looks pretty clean. While we're on this view, you'll notice that there is a cost total. This is where we can see the cost value of the work here. Now, cost is being calculated in two ways. One, it's being calculated using the system cost rate. So there in the admin section, there's an ability to put in a blended cost rate that the system will use to calculate cost of time when no staff person is selected. If a staff person is selected, it will use the cost rate of that specific staff person, or a blended cost rate if it's a role level. So that's how the cost rate is pulling in. Again, go to the help site, search cost rate. You're going to find a whole bunch of stuff there on it, or contact us and let us know if you need some help calculating your cost rates and taking a look at how to put those in. But that allows us to then see if we have cost rates, what is the margin on our internal services. We have a 215% margin on our internal services, not bad. We don't have any extra, internal expenses, and our external expenses, when you combine the 25% photography and the 10% printing, and then you look at the costs and the billable, it's coming out to about 16.5% margin. We're making $575 on our expenses. So that's what having those cost values in there allows you to do, is look at the the margins before the actual work is done. The next couple things I want to touch on are approval processes and also a bit on the revenue schedule. You'll notice that there are approval statuses here. Please use these things. They're really useful. The system doesn't require it, but I highly advise you to just get into a habit. If you know that the item is approved and you want to open up the job, just mark it as approved. It's no big deal. When it's in review, that's typically internal, and when you put it to the client, you want to put it as submitted. So if it's submitted to the client and you're waiting for it to come back, it should be in a submitted status. What that allows you to do is it allows you to do an estimate find. So I could do an estimate find. Notice I like to do these in a separate tab sometimes so I can stay on that page. But I might do an estimate find and say, well, I want to look at the approval status, and I want to see everything that is submitted. And you're going to notice a nice new way to multi-select here. This is a new feature, brand new. It's a lot more user-friendly than before. But I want to look at everything that is submitted. And I can narrow this down by date ranges and a variety of other things. Please check out the search tips. There's lots of cool stuff you can do here, like ranges, more than, greater than, all that kind of stuff. But I want to look at all my submitted estimates. Click Find. Here's a list of all my submitted estimates. Maybe I'll print off a report here, produce a PDF. And I have $221,000 in submitted estimates. A lot of opportunities out there. And if I want to add in things like month to close and probability and things like that, I can choose to manage these columns and add in some of those other fields. Where we see probability of closing and month to close and those types of things that if we're putting in that information, it can be useful on reports. But using these statuses is really useful, and I highly advise you getting into a habit of it. Now, when you do put something into an approved status, it is no longer going to allow you to make any changes without creating a revision. This means that any changes or adjustments we make from here on is going to be tagged with a revision number. And this tab here, Revisions, is going to pop out. So the button that a second ago said Edit now says Revise and Edit. If I select that, it'll let me know it's going to create an editable version, a new version of that, and that new version is R1. Now, if I choose to print that, it's going to show on there as R1. If I don't want, maybe I went through 3 internal revisions before I sent it to the client, but I don't want the client to see that. Then I can just take that out. It's still going to show me internally, but that's showing the client-facing version. You'll notice that I just clicked Submit, and it asks me, do I want to set the estimate back to approved? I'm going to say in this case, actually don't. I'm going to keep it in review. And then the client is no longer going to see that R1. Or maybe if we wanted to name it something else, it's an open field, we could have named it something else. Another thing I want to touch on is the revenue schedule. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but the revenue schedule allows you to add in line items. So add in line items with dates for when you expect billing to occur and how much you expect to bill. So, for my internal services, I have 81.25. I might want to bill 81.25 on this day. And if you want to be, really detailed about it, we can add in a whole bunch of line items and break down, what the billing schedule is going to be. But that's, it's work. You got to do that manually. There isn't really an automated way to do that right now. So something that you can do that I highly recommend doing is just get into a habit of when you're creating an estimate, down at the bottom left, click on this button that says Auto Revenue Forecast. Just select it. That's all you need to do. And that is going to allow you to use the Gross Revenue Forecast report in the report section. So in the report section, under Plan, we're going to find a Gross Revenue Forecast report. And what hitting that button does is it takes 100% of all revenue and drops it onto the final due date of the job, making the assumption that by the final due date you will have billed for everything. That means that without doing any kind of manual work or manual calculations, you're able to take advantage of that forecast report just by the simple click of a button. Now you might be, again, billing in chunks and increments and things like that, and a more detailed revenue schedule will help with that. It's something that we do diligently. We use Function Point to manage all of our business as well, and we put in revenue schedules for every client that we have, but and it does take time. I mean, I've become a bit of a master at it. I can put in a 2 or 3 year revenue schedule and take me like 6 minutes, maybe less. I mean, that's 6 minutes of your day gone. So it's does take a bit of time to do like a 2 or 3 year schedule, but I've become pretty quick. But if you don't want to take the time to do that, all you got to do is hit this button, and it generates a revenue schedule for you. So there's a bit of a theme around this type of thing. Getting into the habit of taking these actions. Put in the close probability, put in the month to close, select the contact, put in a default rate category. Doing these things is going to allow you to take advantage of some of the reporting that the system offers without you having to do a lot of manual work. And then use the approval status. It's really useful. It allows you to know what is approved and what is not. And then all of our revisions and all of our versions are going to be kept there. So anytime we make a change, we'll be able to go back and review that change. The next thing I want to touch on is around briefs and schedules and files and how they all connect to this and to the job. Before I do, I just want to check in any questions on anything so far.
Oh, hey, Mark. Yeah, we're getting lots and lots of good questions, which is awesome. Thus far, I've been answering them just as we go, but I will keep an eye out for ones that might be suitable for you to address for sure.
Gotcha. I'm contemplating. I'm wondering if I should take a look at copy first. Let's do that. Let's look at copying and templating before we look at briefs and schedules. So there's a button up here that says Copy Estimate. Really useful. Now, I'm wondering if okay, let's do it this way. Let's do it this way. I had an order, and now I'm kind of second guessing it because there's a cool feature I want to show, but it'd probably take a little bit too much time. So I'll just talk about it. But let's look at this. So the first copy scenario. I'm creating an estimate right now, and it's for a brochure. And I'm looking at this, and I'm saying, well, this looks really good. The next time this company or any other company contacts me and they ask me for a tri-fold brochure on glossy paper with us doing the photography and providing all the design and all the copy and all that stuff, this is what I want to charge them, and this is the structure that I want it to have. What I would do is I'd select to copy the estimate and make it a template. Now, the way that we work with templates for estimates in the system is the process of copying them. So you can copy anything, but in this case, I'm making it to be a template. So the way I'm going to make it useful is by giving it an appropriate name. So I'm going to call this, brochure template. Now, if this, again, was a template for a, trifold gloss paper, all copy, all design, and so forth, I would put that into the name. But in this case, it's just a brochure template. Now, the company is for, well, this template, if it was specific to North Shore Auto Group, then keep it that way. But in this case, it's not. It can be used for any company. Therefore, my own company is who it's going to belong to. And anytime I need this, I'm just going to select it, but this way it's not sitting under one of my clients. So it's a brochure template. It's a type of brochure, and I can enter any other information. So if I want a default description, I can have that fill in. The estimate date and delivery date, you typically want both of those blank. You wouldn't want that filling in there. The close probability, that's going to be a case-by-case basis. Same with the month close. So take out all that information except for just the stuff that you know is going to be the same each time. Now here's a really neat option that is not really applicable for this specific example, but it is applicable for the concept of copying estimates in general. Quantities from estimated/actuals. What this is asking you is the new estimate that you're creating, where do you want the values to come from? Let's say that this was not some estimate that was just, sitting there and there was no work done for it. Let's say that this was an actual piece of work that we did. Now, if we choose estimated, it's going to copy the estimated values from the previous estimate/job and use it for your new estimate. If we select actuals, it's going to add up all the time and all the expenses and use those values as the new values for your new estimate. So to give you an example, let's say we estimate $10,000 for a brochure, and it's 100 hours at $100 an hour to keep the math simple. And we finish it, and we ended up putting in 135 hours into it because we went way over. And we didn't make mistakes; it's just we underestimated it initially. And another client contacts us, and they ask for something similar. We go to that job and we copy it. We might want to copy the actuals so that instead of the 100 hours that we estimated, the 135 hours that we actually worked are going to be used to generate the new estimate. It's a really neat feature. I highly recommend taking advantage of it and thinking about it when you're copying things. But in this case, I'm going to submit, and everything that we've put in to the previous estimate has now been brought into what is now our template. The way that the template would be used is similar to the way that it was created, and that was by copying it. So for example, let's say I'm off somewhere else in the system. And the client calls me up and they say, hey, I really need a trifold brochure from you guys. And I say, okay, well, let me see what that's going to cost you. Just give me 1 second. So I'm going to do an estimate find. I'm making them listen to some hold music maybe. I'm going to say, okay, well, name. I want a template. Now, I might narrow this down and say I want a brochure template. But in this case, I'm going to leave it blank. Maybe I had 10 brochure templates. So I type brochure name template. In this case, I'm just going to say, show me all my templates. Click find, and here's a list of all of my templates. Now, there's actually a step that I forgot to mention that's important. I'll notice all of our templates, and there's a theme with all of them except for the brochure template we just created, and that is that it should be declined. It should not be in review. You should decline the templates you create. But I see my brochure template, and okay, it's coming out to $12,200, including the printing for 5,000 copies, and that'd probably be in the description there that this is a brochure for with 5,000 copies. But I'd select it, and I would choose to copy it. Now again, it should be declined. I neglected to do that, but it should be in a decline status, and I would then choose to copy this estimate and use it over again. Now, you don't need to copy something and name it a template in order to be able to use it again. You can copy any estimate from any job for any client at any time. Pull up the estimate, select copy, and it's going to bring in all the detail, including descriptions, values, and hours, and so forth. So that's how that copy feature is used, and that's how we're then creating templates for them to be used over again. Now, once we choose to copy it, we would, of course, select the client it's for, give it the appropriate name, give it a due date, put in our month close and our probability and all that jazz, and then it'll be a new opportunity for us. Coming back to, just to make sure real quick, any questions on the copying or the templating or anything like that?
Just had a question in from Maura regarding the copy. When you copy from actuals, that's bringing over that's just exactly as it sounds. Yes, it's bringing over whatever actuals were on the template or on the estimate you copied. Yes.
Yeah, let me give you a really quick example of that. So I'm going to pull up a job here. I'm going to try to be pretty quick. So let's look at a job that I have as an example. It's probably not the best example, but let's use it anyways. So I have this job, and it has a pretty detailed structure. But we estimated 100 hours at $15,000. Maybe we're done. Maybe we only worked on this for 62 hours and we finished it. So that's all that it took. If I look at the estimate here and I choose to copy it, it's letting me know some of these the service groups are disabled there. Sorry about that. Might be a better example. Yeah, I apologize. Just for the sake of time, I'm not gonna search for a better example. I'm just gonna move on. But to answer your question, yes, it's doing exactly as what it's describing. If you click actuals, it's going to add up all the actual time and all the actual expenses and use those as the new estimated values. So if you had a job where you estimated 100 hours, but the actual value was 150, If you select the actuals button, it's going to take 150 hours as the new estimated value. So it's just doing as you would kind of expect, just based on the naming convention.
Thanks, Mark.
No problem. So a few other things to mention here real quick. Any information that we put into an estimate is going to be carried into a job. So for example, in the action buttons, I have a button here that says add job. I also have a button here that says add schedule. I also have a button that says add brief. Now if I add a brief to this estimate, and if we have a type that it matches the job type we selected, then it'll fill in. If not, I can choose from a list of brief types that I want. But we can add in a brief, fill in the details here. This is an example I've created with some required fields. That's our brief created. I'll go back to our estimate here. So this estimate now has a brief related to it. Maybe we want to get a head start on our scheduling, and I want to add in a schedule even though we haven't opened up the job yet. So I can add a schedule to this estimate. I'm not going to touch too much on the scheduling and the tasking and things like that, but that's a schedule then generated using the structure we put into the estimate. Go back to my estimate details. So you'll notice that we have a schedule, we have a brief, we might even upload some files. And I can create a folder structure here and upload files. Now all of this information, everything that we put into the estimate, when I choose up at the top right corner in my action buttons to select add job, all the detail is going to come into the job. When I get to the job, I then have a schedule. I have a brief. I have a financial structure that matches my estimate. I have two versions of my estimate. And also any files that I might have uploaded as well. And then the summary is going to show, hey, the schedule ended up being 9 total tasks. We estimated 86 hours. The total billable value is coming out to 12,200. We don't have any actuals in there yet at this point. So that's kind of how to look at the concept of briefs and schedules and things like that coming through into the job from the estimate, if you should choose to go in that order. If you go in the other order, that's totally fine. If you open up the job and then add the schedule and then add the brief, then you can. But if you want to get a head start on that, or if you're estimating but you're doing a creative brief at the same time, then doing so is the information is not lost. It comes into the job as well. That looks like I'm about 3 minutes under as far as the overall content. Any questions that I can answer this time?
Oh, hey, Mark. I think we're okay for now. Lisa had asked a good one that I've answered, but it was, is there a way to copy an estimate and apply it to an existing job? So I had to give her a no can do on that one. But in case anyone else was wondering, that's not an option. But we've had a really impressive amount of questions. So this might be a subject that we should revisit and maybe break into smaller chunks, because it's obviously got people talking.
Yeah, and when I'm going through this, when I plan these webinars, it's funny because sometimes I'll think, okay, well, that's not going to take too long to cover, and then you get into it, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, it's 15 minutes on the topic of rates that I use. Yeah, so I mean, just like you said, there's a lot there. So perhaps we should take a look at breaking this into multiple sessions.
And Mark, I think you meant to say when we plan these webinars, not when just
of course,
yeah,
of course. Not try to take away any credit. I would never be able to do these without you.
Yes, well, and vice versa, my friend. Okay, well, yeah, I think we should look at maybe revisiting this and breaking it into smaller pieces together. But thank you, everyone, of course, for all the really, really good questions, and keep them coming. I'll leave it open, I guess, for probably another good 5 minutes, so people feel free to type questions in. We did record it, so we'll post that later today or tomorrow. Mark, thank you for being such a fabulous presenter as always.
No problem, and thank everybody for their time today, and I will see you all next week for our next session.
Great.
Oh, actually, one other thing I want to mention, just as always, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, connect with us on LinkedIn, pen us on Pinterest, and I'm not sure if I'm forgetting any other things, but the whole social media stuff, hook us up. We're cool. We'll share cool cat pictures with you, I promise.
Or dinosaur hand puppet pictures with you.
Yes, this is true.
Yes. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll keep answering questions here, and we'll see you next time.